My mother left me and my little sister by ourselves so she could go on a secret getaway with her new boyfriend. So I reached out to my dad, and he immediately moved for full custody. Then she finally confessed she was never really trying to keep us. She just didn't want the child support checks to stop. My mother spent 3 years convincing a judge she couldn't live without us. Turns out, she couldn't live without the check that came with us. $2,800 a month. That's what my sister and I were worth to her. Not as children, as a deposit. My name is Declan Pierce. I'm 16 years old, and I'm going to tell you the story of how my mother left me and my 10-year-old sister alone in an empty house so she could fly to a resort with a man she'd been dating for 8 months, and how that weekend ended a 3-year lie that none of us were supposed to uncover. I need to start with the divorce, because that's where the lie began. My parents split when I was 13. Hallie was 7. I remember the night it became real. Not the arguments before, not the tension that sat in our house like a third parent, but the specific night my dad walked out the front door carrying a duffel bag and a face I'd never seen on him before. He looked at me standing at the top of the stairs and said, "I'll see you Friday, buddy. I promise." And then he left, and the house got very quiet, and Hallie crawled into my bed that night because she could feel the empty space even if she couldn't name it. The divorce was ugly. Not screaming ugly, courtroom ugly. The kind where everything is polite and procedural on the surface and devastating underneath. My mom, Melinda, wanted full custody, and she fought for it with a performance that would have won awards if there'd been an audience bigger than one family court judge. She cried on the stand. Real tears, or what looked real enough. She talked about how she'd sacrificed her career to raise us, how she'd been the primary caregiver since birth, how taking us away from her would destroy everything these children know. She used phrases like stable home environment and emotional continuity and a mother's bond that cannot be replicated. The judge ate it up. Judges usually do when a mother cries and a father sits quietly in a suit trying to look like he deserves to see his own kids. My dad, Russell Pierce, is not a dramatic man. He's a project manager for a construction firm. He wakes up at 5:30, makes his coffee black, eats the same breakfast every day, and has never in his life raised his voice in a room where it wasn't necessary. He's the kind of man who shows up, not with speeches or performances, just with his body, his time, his attention, and the quiet, stubborn reliability of someone who does what he says he'll do. Every time, without exception. In court, that translated to emotionally reserved, which, if you're a father in a custody hearing, is code for you lose. Dad got every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. He paid child support, on time, every month, without a single missed payment in 3 years. $2,800 a month. He never complained about the amount, never used it as leverage, never said a word about it to me or Hallie. He just paid it the way he pays everything, because it was owed, because it was for his kids, because that's who Russell Pierce is. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was where that money was actually going. For the first year after the divorce, things were okay. Not good, okay. Mom was present mostly. She made dinner some nights. She went to Hallie's school events when she remembered. She kept the house functional. It wasn't warm. Our house was never warm after Dad left. Like the thermostat dropped the day he walked out and nobody adjusted it. But it was livable. I told myself this was just what divorce looked like. This was the new normal. I could handle normal. Then Trent Lawson showed up, and normal left the building. Mom met Trent about 14 months after the divorce. I don't know where. She never told us, and I never asked, because by that point I'd learned that asking Melinda questions she didn't want to answer was a reliable way to get either silence or hostility. What I know is this. Trent drove an SUV with tinted windows. He wore shirts with no sleeves, and cologne you could smell from the driveway. He had a job that involved consulting, which as far as I could tell meant he traveled constantly and had enough money to take my mother to places she'd never been. Within 3 months of dating Trent, my mother became a different person. Not gradually, sharply. Like someone had flipped a switch and the woman who'd fought in court for her children was replaced by someone who couldn't wait to get away from them. The new clothes came first, then the phone that was always face down on the counter, then the work trips that didn't align with any work I'd ever seen her do. She was a part-time receptionist at a dental office. Then the nights she didn't come home until after midnight, and the mornings she slept until 11 while I got Hallie dressed, made her breakfast, packed her lunch, and walked her to the bus stop. I was 14 the first time she left us overnight. She said she had a work thing in the city. Left at 6 p.m. on a Friday. Told me there was money on the counter for food and that she'd be back Saturday afternoon. She came back Sunday morning. No explanation. No apology. Just walked in, set her purse down, and went to her room. I'd kept Hallie alive for 36 hours, fed her, entertained her, put her to bed, made sure she brushed her teeth, and my mother walked past me like I was a lamp she'd forgotten to turn off. That was the first time. It wasn't the last. Over the next year and a half, Melinda left us alone at least a dozen times. Sometimes for one night. Sometimes for a full weekend. The excuses rotated: work conference, girlfriend's birthday trip, emergency at the office. None of them were real. I knew because I'd started checking. A quick look at her Instagram, the account she thought I didn't know about, the one under a nickname, showed the truth. Trent's arm around her at a rooftop bar. A beach sunset tagged in a city 400 miles away. A cocktail on a balcony with a caption that said, "Finally living." Finally living. While her 16-year-old son heated up canned soup for her 10-year-old daughter and pretended everything was fine. I became the parent. Not officially, not with any title or recognition, but functionally. I cooked. I cleaned. I helped Hallie with her homework, 4th grade math, which I handled, and 4th grade reading assignments, which I actually enjoyed because Hallie reads out loud with this dramatic voice that makes every story sound like a movie. I made sure she had clean clothes for school. I set her alarm. I walked her to the bus. I picked her up when Mom couldn't make it. I lied to teachers who asked why Melinda wasn't at parent-teacher conferences. She's sick. She got called into work. She sends her apologies. I became the most fluent liar in the Pierce family, and I hated every word of it. I didn't tell Dad. That's the part I'm most ashamed of, and it's the part one need you to understand. I didn't tell my father that his children were being left alone because I was terrified, not of Mom, but of the system. I was 13 when the judge gave her custody. I watched the process. I saw how it worked. And what I learned was that the system doesn't move fast, it doesn't listen to kids, and if I made noise, there was a chance, however small, that Hallie and I would get separated, put in different homes, placed with strangers while the adults figured things out. That possibility was more terrifying to me than any empty house, any cold night, any skipped meal. I would rather raise my sister myself than risk losing her. So I kept my mouth shut, and I kept the machine running. But a machine runs until it doesn't. And it broke on the weekend Hallie got sick. It was November, Friday afternoon. Mom came downstairs in heels and a dress that had no business being worn to any work function I'd ever heard of. Her suitcase was by the door, the nice one, the one she only used for flights. "I have a conference this weekend," she said, not looking at me. "There's cash on the counter. Order food. I'll be back Sunday night." "Where's the conference?" I asked, not because I expected the truth, because I wanted to see how effortlessly she'd lie. "Chicago. Work thing." I left the number for the hotel on the fridge. There was no number on the fridge. I checked. She left. I heard Trent's SUV pull up 30 seconds later. She didn't even pretend to take her own car. Friday night was fine. Hallie and I ordered pizza, watched a movie, did our usual routine. I put her to bed at 9. She asked where Mom was. "Work trip," I said. She nodded. She didn't even look surprised anymore. 10 years old and already desensitized to her mother's absence. That fact sat in my chest like a stone. Saturday morning, Hallie woke up hot. Not warm, hot. I put my hand on her forehead and pulled it back like I'd touched a stove. Her eyes were glassy. Her face was flushed. She said her stomach hurt. By noon, she was vomiting. I called Mom. Straight to voicemail. Texted, "Hallie is sick. Throwing up. Has a fever. Please call me." No response. Called again an hour later. Voicemail. Texted again. Nothing. Called at 4 p.m. 5 p.m. 6. 7. Every call went to the same dead silence. I was 16 years old, alone with a sick 10-year-old, and the person legally responsible for us was unreachable. I gave Hallie children's Tylenol from the medicine cabinet. I made her drink water in small sips. I sat on the bathroom floor with her at 2 a.m. while she threw up and cried and asked for Mom, and I held her hair back and said, "She'll be home soon, Hal. I'm here. I'm right here." I didn't sleep Saturday night. Not a minute. I sat in the hallway between our bedrooms, back against the wall, phone in my hand, waiting for it to ring. It never did. Sunday morning. Hallie's fever hadn't broken. She was pale and shaky and couldn't keep water down. I was running on zero sleep, and the kind of fear that doesn't feel like fear. It feels like math. Cold calculations. If her fever hits 104, I drive to the ER. If she can't drink by noon, I drive to the ER. If she stops responding, I call 911. A 16-year-old running triage in a suburban house because his mother was somewhere drinking cocktails with a man named Trent. And that's when I found the photo. I don't know why I checked. Maybe I was angry enough to look. Maybe I needed confirmation of what I already knew. I opened Instagram, found the account, and there it was, posted 6 hours ago, while Hallie was vomiting and I was sitting on the bathroom floor begging God or the universe or anyone to make her fever go down. A photo. Melinda and Trent. Poolside at a resort in Scottsdale, Arizona. Not Chicago. Not a conference. Scottsdale. She was in a swimsuit, holding a drink with a paper umbrella in it, laughing. Trent had his arm around her. The caption, "This is what I needed." She'd tagged the resort. She'd tagged him. She'd put a heart emoji. While Hallie shook with fever and called out for her mother, Melinda was at a resort pool with a cocktail and a heart emoji. Something in me broke. Not like glass, like a dam. Everything I'd been holding back, every lie I'd told, every night I'd spent being the parent so she could be the girlfriend, every time I'd made excuses to teachers and family and myself. All of it hit me at once. And in that flood, one thought surfaced, clear and absolute. I'm calling Dad. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking, not from fear this time, but from the release of finally doing what I should have done a year ago. I called my father at 7:14 a.m. on a Sunday morning, and he answered on the first ring. Because Russell Pierce always answers on the first ring. "Declan, what's wrong?" I told him everything. Not just the weekend, everything. The year and a half of being left alone. The overnights. The fake work trips. The empty fridge nights. The money on the counter that was supposed to replace a mother's presence. Hallie getting sick. The unanswered calls. The Scottsdale photo. I told him while sitting on the hallway floor with my back against the wall and tears running down my face that I didn't bother wiping because there was nobody there to see them except the walls of a house that had stopped being a home a long time ago. Dad went quiet. The dangerous kind of quiet. The kind I'd only heard once before, when a contractor on one of his job sites made a safety violation that could have killed someone. It's the quiet of a man who has processed the situation, identified the failure, and is now calculating the response with zero margin for error. "Listen to me, Declan. Pack a bag for you. Pack a bag for Hallie. Enough for a week. I'm leaving now. I'll be there in 3 hours." He made it in 2.5. He walked into that house and went straight to Hallie. Felt her forehead. Checked her eyes. Picked her up, all 62 pounds of her, and carried her to his truck like she weighed nothing. She wrapped her arms around his neck and said, "Daddy," in this small, raw voice that nearly put me on the floor. He buckled her into the back seat, put a blanket over her, and turned to me. "You did everything right," he said. "I need you to know that. You kept her safe. You kept her alive. That was not your job, and you did it anyway. I'm proud of you, son." I got in the truck. He drove us to urgent care first. Hallie had a stomach virus, treatable, not dangerous, but she was dehydrated. They gave her fluids. Then Dad drove us to his apartment. Made Hallie soup. Put her on the couch with every blanket he owned. Sat beside her until she fell asleep. Then he went into his bedroom, closed the door, and called his lawyer. By Monday morning, Russell Pierce had filed an emergency motion for full custody modification. And here's where the second layer of the story opens up, because the file his lawyer submitted wasn't thin. It wasn't a reaction to one bad weekend. It was months of documentation. Dad had been watching. Quietly. Carefully. The way he watches everything. Not with drama, but with attention. On his weekends, he'd notice things. Hallie showing up with unwashed hair. Both of us arriving hungry. Actually hungry. The kind where you eat 2 plates at dinner because you haven't had a real meal since Wednesday. Hallie mentioning casually, the way kids do, that Mom wasn't home when I woke up, or Declan made me dinner because Mom was out. Dad wrote it all down. Dates, details, Hallie's exact words. He didn't confront Mom. He didn't accuse. He just built a quiet, meticulous record of every red flag, waiting for the moment that turned flags into evidence. My phone call was that moment. The final piece that turned suspicion into certainty and a file of notes into a legal case. Mom found out about the custody motion on Tuesday. She called me. Not Dad. Not the lawyer, me. Her voice was sharp, panicked, the voice of someone who's been caught and is already calculating the spin. Declan, what did you tell your father? The truth. You had no right. I was coming back Sunday night. It was 2 days. You're 16. You can handle 2 days. Hallie was throwing up for 12 hours, and you didn't answer your phone. You were in Scottsdale with Trent. Silence. Then, who told you I was in? Did you go through my phone? Instagram, Mom. You posted it. More silence. The kind where you can hear someone's story collapsing in real time. I need you to call your father and tell him you exaggerated. Tell him Hallie wasn't that sick. Tell him I arranged for someone to check on you. You didn't arrange for anyone. Declan, please. If this goes to court, I could lose. You could lose what? Because you already lost us, Mom. You lost us every Friday night you walked out the door and didn't come back. You lost us every morning I got Hallie ready for school while you slept until noon. You lost us when your daughter was sick and crying for you and your phone was off because you were at a pool in Arizona. You didn't lose us in court. You lost us in the house. The court is just going to make it official. She hung up. The custody hearing was 6 weeks later. Melinda hired a lawyer, a sharp woman in a gray suit who specialized in protecting maternal rights, which as far as I could tell meant protecting mothers from the consequences of their own choices. Mom put on the same performance that had worked 3 years earlier. The tears, the trembling voice, the "I can't live without my baby's" vocabulary that she deployed with the practiced fluency of an actress hitting her marks for the 100th show. But this time, the stage was different. The judge was different. A woman in her 50s with reading glasses and a face that suggested she'd heard every lie a courtroom could produce and had stopped being impressed by any of them. And this time, there was a 16-year-old in the room who'd spent 14 months being the parent his mother refused to be, and who had come prepared to say so. I testified. Calmly. Clearly. I described the overnights. Not one, not two, but the full pattern. 12 times in 14 months. I'd kept a log. Not because anyone told me to, but because at some point, the engineer's son in me realized that if this day ever came, I'd need more than my word. I showed the judge the text log from the weekend Hallie got sick. 12 unanswered calls and 6 unanswered texts over 36 hours. Timestamped, screenshotted, printed. I showed the Instagram screenshot. Geotagged Scottsdale, timestamped 8:14 p.m. Saturday, posted while my sister was vomiting into a toilet, and I was sitting on the bathroom floor, holding her hair back, and trying to remember what temperature meant you had to go to the emergency room. I described what it's like to be 16 and responsible for a 10-year-old. Not for a night. Not for a weekend. For months. I described walking Hallie to the bus on mornings when I hadn't slept, because I was listening for her breathing through the wall. I described making grocery lists with a budget of whatever cash Mom left on the counter. Usually $40, sometimes $30, once just a $20 and a sticky note that said, "Make it work." I described lying to teachers, lying to family, lying to Dad, because I was more afraid of the system separating me from my sister than I was of the situation we were already in. The judge listened. Not the way adults usually listen to teenagers, with half an ear and a face that says, "I'll decide what's important here." She listened the way someone listens when they're hearing testimony that confirms something they suspected from the first page of the filing. Intently, completely, with her pen still and her eyes on mine. Then Hallie's letter was read. Dad's lawyer had asked Hallie if she wanted to say anything to the judge. She didn't want to speak. She was 10, the courtroom scared her, and she'd been biting her thumbnail in the hallway for 20 minutes before the session started. So she wrote a letter, by hand, on lined paper from her school notebook, in the careful, slightly uneven handwriting of a 4th grader who wanted desperately to be taken seriously and didn't yet know that her handwriting was the most powerful thing about it. The lawyer read it aloud. I'm going to tell you what it said, word for word, because I have it memorized. Because some things get carved into you and stay there. Dear Judge, my name is Hallie Pierce. I am 10 years old. I want to live with my dad. My mom goes away a lot, and sometimes she doesn't come back when she says she will. When she is gone, I get scared at night because the house is dark and quiet, and I don't know if she is coming back or not. My brother Declan takes care of me when she's gone. He makes me dinner and helps me with my homework, and he walked me to the bus every day for a whole year. He is the best brother in the world, but he shouldn't have to be my parent because he is only 16 and he is also a kid. My dad always answers when I call. He always picks me up on time. He never leaves without telling me where he's going. When I am at my dad's house, I don't wake up at night to check if someone is home because I already know he is there. I feel safe at my dad's house. I want to feel safe all the time, not just on weekends. Thank you. Hallie Pierce. The courtroom was silent for a long time after the lawyer finished reading. The judge took the letter from the lawyer's hand and read it again herself, slowly, tracing the lines with her finger, the way you read something that matters. Then she looked at Melinda. And in that look, over the top of her reading glasses, across the width of the courtroom, I saw 3 years of carefully constructed performance dissolve like sugar in hot water. The tears didn't work this time. The vocabulary didn't work. Because a 10-year-old girl in her best handwriting had said, in 60 seconds, what no lawyer could argue against and no performance could override. I want to feel safe all the time, not just on weekends. Melinda's lawyer tried to negotiate after that. Reduced custody, supervised visitation, a modified arrangement, anything to avoid a full transfer. And it was during those negotiations, in a side conversation that was relayed to Dad's attorney and eventually to Dad and eventually to me, that my mother finally said the thing that had been true all along. I was never really trying to keep them. I just didn't want the child support to stop. $2,800 a month. For 3 years. That's $104,000. $104,000 paid by a father who drove a truck with 200,000 miles on it because he couldn't justify a new one. A father who packed the same turkey sandwich every single day and ate at his desk because saving $12 at lunch meant $72 a week he could redirect toward his children's support. I found that out later, not from Dad, because Russell Pierce doesn't trade in guilt, but from his coworker Dennis, who mentioned it at dinner one night without realizing I didn't know. Your dad hasn't bought lunch in 3 years, kid. Turns every penny toward you too. That money, every packed sandwich, every skipped vacation, every worn-out tire Dad drove on longer than he should have, went not to his kids, but to Melinda's new wardrobe, Melinda's nights out, Melinda's trips with Trent Lawson to resorts in Scottsdale, while her daughter vomited and her son sat in a dark hallway alone. I did the math later. The new car she'd bought 14 months after the divorce. The one she told us she'd been saving for. $32,000. She hadn't saved anything. She'd redirected child support. The designer bags that appeared in her closet with tags still on. The hair appointments every 3 weeks at $200 a pop. The nails, the facials, the clothes that rotated faster than seasons. The dinners with Trent at restaurants I'd never heard of. All of it funded by checks meant to feed, clothe, and shelter 2 children who were eating cereal for dinner 3 nights a week. We weren't her children. We were her income source. And the moment that income was threatened, the mask came off. The judge granted Dad full custody. Effective immediately. I remember the drive to Dad's apartment after the ruling. It was raining, the soft, steady kind that turns the world gray and quiet and makes everything feel like it's being washed. Hallie sat in the back, wearing the purple hoodie Dad had bought her on one of his weekends. Her favorite, the one she refused to leave at Mom's house because she was afraid it would disappear the way things tended to disappear in that house. She was looking out the window, tracing raindrops on the glass with her finger, following them down to the bottom of the pane, and she said something that I carry with me every single day. Declan, is this the last time we have to go back? Yeah, Hal. This is the last time. She nodded, went back to tracing the raindrops. And then, so quiet, I almost missed it under the sound of the wipers and the rain. Good. Dad's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He didn't say anything, but I could see, from the passenger seat, that his jaw was set and his eyes were wet, and he was driving with the focused precision of a man who was holding himself together because his kids needed him to hold it together for 10 more minutes. We made it to the apartment. He parked, turned off the engine, sat there for a moment, just a moment, with his hands still on the wheel and his head slightly bowed. Then he took a breath, opened the door, and said, "Let's go home, guys." Home. He said it like it had always been true. Like the apartment had been waiting for us the whole time. Like home wasn't a place, but a person, and that person had been there all along, on the other side of a custody agreement, counting the days. Dad's place wasn't big. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that could hold maybe 3 people if none of them opened the fridge at the same time. But he'd prepared for us. Hallie's room had a bed with a purple comforter, her favorite color, which he remembered without being told. My room had a desk he'd built himself, with a lamp and a shelf for my books. The fridge was full. Not just full, organized. Labeled shelves. Hallie's yogurts on the left. My energy drinks on the right. Actual groceries, purchased by a man who'd been waiting for this moment for 3 years and had apparently been shopping for it in advance. The first morning, Dad made breakfast. Eggs, toast, orange juice. Nothing fancy, just real food made by a person who was awake and present and not sleeping off a Friday night with Trent. Hallie sat at the table and ate everything on her plate and then asked for seconds. Dad poured her more juice and said, "You can always have more, sweetheart. There's always more here." She looked at him with this expression, part disbelief, part relief, part the cautious hope of a child who's been conditioned to expect less. And I realized, watching my 10-year-old sister eat toast in a small kitchen in a small apartment, that this was the first meal in over a year where she wasn't wondering if the person who made it would be there when she woke up. That's what safety looks like. Not a big house. Not a courtroom victory. Not a custody document. Safety looks like a man standing at a stove, making eggs for his kids on a Wednesday morning because he can. Because he's there. Because he was always going to be there, regardless of what any judge or any court or any system decided. Russell Pierce didn't need a ruling to be a father. He'd been one all along, from a distance, through a check, through every other weekend visits that he never missed, and Wednesday evenings that he treated like sacred ground. The ruling just removed the obstacle between him and the job he'd been doing from the other side of a wall for 3 years. Mom called once after the custody transfer. I answered because I thought, hoped, against all evidence, that she might want to talk to Hallie. That maybe some flicker of actual motherhood might surface. She didn't ask about Hallie. She didn't ask about me. She didn't ask how we were adjusting, whether Hallie was sleeping better, whether her children were okay. She asked if there was any way to adjust the financial arrangement. I hung up. She texted twice more over the following weeks. Both about money, one about outstanding reimbursements, another asking whether Dad's child support obligation officially ended or transferred. Neither text mentioned our names. Both read like invoices from a closed account. Then the text stopped. Then the call stopped. No birthday card for Hallie in October. No Thanksgiving call. No Christmas. Nothing. Just the clean, complete absence of a woman who disentangled herself from the two people she was supposed to love most and discovered, with what I imagine was something close to relief, that the disconnection didn't cost her anything she valued. That's the thing about people who see you as a transaction. When the transaction ends, so does the relationship. There's no love underneath the invoice. There's no bond that survives the cancellation of the account. Just silence. The hollow silence of a woman who fought for custody the way someone fights for a parking spot. Not because they want to be there, but because they don't want to lose the space. 6 months have passed. Hallie is thriving. She made honor roll last quarter, her first time, because it's hard to study when your home life is a question mark. She joined the art club at school. She draws these incredible portraits of animals, mostly dogs, because she wants one desperately, and Dad is already researching breeds. She sleeps through the night now. She didn't used to. At Mom's house, she'd wake up at 2 a.m. and come to my room and ask if Mom was home. Every night. For months. She doesn't do that anymore. She sleeps straight through until morning because her brain has finally accepted that the person in the next room isn't going anywhere. I'm doing okay too. Better than okay. I have time now. Actual time, not the stolen, exhausted scraps of time left over after parenting a 10-year-old. I'm catching up in school. I'm thinking about college, something that felt impossible a year ago, when my future was measured in how many days I could keep Hallie fed and alive before the next work trip. Dad and I talk more than we ever did. Not about heavy stuff, about normal stuff. About sports and school, and what to have for dinner, and whether the truck needs new tires. Normal father-son stuff. The kind of conversation that feels like nothing but means everything when you've spent 2 years carrying a weight that no 16-year-old should know the shape of. Last weekend, I was sitting in the living room doing homework. Hallie was at the kitchen table with Dad, working on a school project, a poster about the water cycle. She had markers spread everywhere. Dad was cutting out cloud shapes from white paper with a focus and precision that said everything about who he is as a person. Hallie was giving directions. No, Dad, the cumulus clouds need to be bigger. They're the fluffy ones. And Dad was following them without a hint of impatience. I watched them for a while. Just sat there with my textbook open and my pen still and watched my father help my sister with a poster about rain. And I felt something I hadn't felt in so long that I'd forgotten it had a name. Safe. Not safe like a lock on a door or a roof over your head. Safe like a feeling, like a temperature, like the specific warmth of knowing that the person responsible for you actually wants the job, that they didn't take it for the paycheck, that they aren't counting the hours until they can hand you off and disappear, that they will be there in the morning because being there in the morning is not an obligation to them. It's the whole point. My mother fought for custody because $2,800 a month is a lot of money. My father fought for custody because 2 kids is a lot of love. The difference between those two things is the difference between a house and a home, between a check and a childhood, between a woman at a resort pool with a cocktail and a man at a kitchen table cutting out paper clouds. Hallie's poster got an A. She hung it on the fridge. Dad stood back and looked at it like it was a blueprint for a cathedral. And I stood in the hallway, the same position I'd spent so many nights in at Mom's house, back against the wall, guarding my sister's sleep, and I realized I didn't have to stand guard anymore, because someone else was finally standing there instead, and he'd been waiting for 3 years.